Avowed was a nice surprise in the July Xbox Game Showcase. Nobody really saw Obsidian coming out with a new first-person RPG. It looks really fantastic from the very short teaser trailer that was shown. We see a skeleton army attacking a castle, and apparently our character is in some cave getting ready to fight whatever is around the corner, with a single blade and a spell. Now, I didn't think we would have some info about the game for a while, but there has been a recent leak for Avowed, and has some very nice info in it. Now, this info might be totally false, so keep that in mind, but I wanted to go over it anyway. The info was coming from a Resetera post made by a user named Sponger. A lot of these leaks are about the game world and setting as opposed to player abilities, skills, or anything of that nature, so we shall start with those ones. Avowed will take place mostly in the Living Lands region of Eora, at least at the start. The Living Lands are a frontier island area in the far north, a land of wild weather, strange beasts, and hundreds of difficult to reach valleys, containing oddities never before seen by mortals. The racial mix in the area is extremely diverse, but not necessarily harmonious. And I found this description from a card for pillars, and it details that each valley has a different ecosystem and they vary dramatically, which would allow Obsidian to create many types of biomes like WoW has. And since it could be a prequel, they can pretty much have creative freedom to do whatever they want in the world of pillars. And this fits nicely with one of the other leaks that mentioned, which was that there are 2 large cities planned, with many smaller ones with strong focus on contrasting wild areas, rivers, mountains, and desolated areas. So Obsidian is going potentially for many types of fauna and lands for Avowed. Diversity is awesome, and from the teaser I never would have guessed that, since all we see is that fog in a dark and gloomy area for a battlefield. Avowed is going to be an open world game that is much larger than Skyrim, but the leaker goes on to mention that larger might not be the correct term, but denser is more accurate and more contrasted, whatever that means. I like dense maps as well. Nothing kills an open world game when it's a huge map with nothing in it. And luckily another leak kind of addresses this, with apparent focus on a large amount of factions. I'm assuming he meant factions. This is why I don't know if this is legit. There are misspellings in his post. But it does say a very different approach than what Skyrim did. Now, these must be joinable factions if they are comparing it to Skyrim, since in Skyrim you can join factions. Skyrim had 9 joinable factions and a lot of NPC ones. If a player joined, they would receive perks like being able to store items there, get some quest, armor, even a companion. The leak did have mention of companions, but we'll get to that in a bit. So maybe in Avowed, the factions will decide the class you become when you join them. That's one difference I can see. How do you guys think factions will be different than from Skyrim? Continuing, Obsidian has a big focus on world reactivity, lighting, and next-gen AI and physics, with special focus physics with magic systems. I'm not sure what next-gen AI is, but if there's anything I could compare it to, it would be Cyberpunk, and how they created 1,000 NPCs with individual unique lives. If Obsidian is attempting something like this, then the world would be most definitely feel alive. Now, for the magic system physics, I have no idea what this means, but if we use the imagination, maybe it's whenever you cast a spell, let's say a spell that throws an enemy. Instead of a generic movement, Obsidian is going to go for realism. So the body would move how it would in the real world if something like that existed. So I would imagine it would be more realistic movements to spells and abilities. That would be insanely ambitious and would take a ton of effort and work, but would be game changing. Again, that's just my theory, no idea what it actually is. There was also mention of a real-time weather system, with fog being mentioned as a main real-time element, which I would assume rain would be as well. Last little tidbits about the world are that there will be a great focus on iconic landmarks, statues, and buildings. I personally love this. It reminds me of WoW when you first see Stormwind or Orgrimmar. The leaker also mentions that the game will fully respect the Pillar's creatures lore with new additions. And it really should. It's set in the same universe. The creatures should be respected and developed correctly for Avowed. It's kind of a weird thing to point out, but it was there. Discussing the companions mentioned earlier, you can have them in Avowed, but was specifically said they'd be different from the Outer Worlds. Now, the Outer World companions have their own missions, quests, and objectives, and will ask for players for help completing them. This reminds me of SWTOR, where the companions have their own little side stories, and you help them finish them to complete their companion arc. The Outer World's companions also have their own perks and skills, as well as reacted to your decisions, and will get mad and leave if they didn't agree. This is a neat system to have in the game, and it adds to the game overall, but I'm not sure how companions can be much more, as the leak states they are different. So are they just generic helpers you take in battle? Maybe they are more and offer very deep story aspects, such as being able to be in relationships with. The earlier leak did state they wanted to use next-gen AI, so potentially these companions will be way smarter and offer a more lifelike connection. It's very vague in explaining this, so if you have your own ideas, let me know. Not really any story leaks were mentioned, but there was one about the story about fighting the incoming threat of tyranny, independent of the previous stories. I would assume this means PoE 1 and 2. So there's not much info there. Also mentions that gods will have a special mention in the game, like PoE usually does. Maybe they influence your class or skills in the beginning if you choose to fight for one. Moving on to more of the broader leaks mentioned, Avowed will offer a very advanced character creator. I think any RPG should have this, and being next gen should really have it. There will be bosses in the game, and apparently some are very, very large. Could it be a dragon? I hope so, or an ogre. Dialogue will be dynamically presented to players. Could be in a cutscene sort of way, I think. I can see that being dynamic. And the last one specifically about gameplay, that there is plans for a you can kill anyone in the game idea. Now this is wild if it's true. I'm going to take this as quest givers and even main plot characters. Even Cyberpunk isn't allowing this. So being able to kill anyone is very interesting. But if they can somehow make it work, then why not? Avowed has been in the works for 2 years and 7 months if the leaker is to be believed. 100 people worked on the project for 2 years and a smaller number for the first 7 months. But the team is growing and been in full production already. The target date is going to be 2022 to 2023, which I can actually see being true. I think a lot of the bigger games like Everwild and Fable aren't going to be around until that same time. But yes guys, if true, this is what Avowed could be bringing us. I won't lie, it sounds really ambitious, especially with the physics, next-gen AI, and what sounds like a living, breathing world. I cannot wait until we get more info on the game, especially official info. So if you want to stay in the know, make sure to sub so you don't miss anything, and if you want to see more content, click the videos coming up or down in the description. And until next time, peace.